We have to find a way. And it's when things don't go exactly as planned, we deal. We show up. We find a way.
We knew this was coming, but did anybody expect it would come with this intensity?
Governor's announcement on health orders.
Coronavirus cases are on the rise.
We're going to tackle some of these issues tonight.
One of the most important U.S. Senate races in the entire country.
I've never been prouder of the work we've done, putting together a daily newscast under trying circumstances. But you know what? These trials and tribulations are nothing compared to what the members of the communities that we cover have been going through. We have borne the brunt of this pandemic. So we'll continue this commitment to telling the stories that are important to our audience, to provide a public service to these communities that we've come to know so well through our reporting.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you all today. Welcome to the Spectrum Networks panel. In addition to what you just saw, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about who we are here at Spectrum Networks. So Spectrum Networks is an organization made up of over 30 24/7 local news and sports TV networks and digital platforms in 10 states nationwide. We're opening new newsrooms, including our latest in Portland, Maine, exploring new platforms, and we've already hired almost 300 journalists in 2021 alone. We believe strongly in the power of local news to strengthen democracy and keep local communities informed. I'm joined today by some of my Spectrum Networks colleagues, each of whom has a very unique and different role in our local news operation, and represents the variety of career paths in local news generally and at Spectrum Networks specifically. So to that end, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself, explain who you are, your background, what your role is, and how it fits into our larger mission. So Salika, do you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Katie, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. I am the managing director for our Midwest group, which includes Kentucky, Ohio, and Wisconsin for digital. So we have a total of 4 managing directors, which I'm one of. And as Katie mentioned, we've done a lot of growth and hiring throughout the, almost now year and a half that we have launched the app. I come from a background rich in digital. I started in television, did newspapers well before that, and started at CBS 3 in Philly, went to California, came back to Philly, went to Baltimore, DC, and now I'm here in Columbus, Ohio. So I've had kind of my hand in every pot of digital, if that makes sense, from writing to reporting to managing to working with our talent and our staff. And what we're doing here at Spectrum is really different from your traditional media organizations. And that's something I really want to emphasize is we are really leading in innovation and taking charge in how and our approach. So for us, while we have these roles, we are ever changing in our roles. I think I've kind of went a little long-winded there, but that is me. And I've been with the company now since July 2020. It's been a long, I would say it hasn't been a long road, but it's certainly been an interesting one. And with that, I'll toss back to Katie.
Yes, thanks, Salika. Zyrus, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Howdy, everybody. I'm Zyrus Savage. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a planning editor here in the Raleigh newsroom of Spectrum News 1. I graduated from the #1 HBCU in the land, North Carolina A&T State University. And then I left North Carolina to go to Washington, D.C., where I was a CNN intern and then a CNN news associate. From there, I did the 2016 election with CNN and got a lot of great experience, but decided that I wanted to come back home. So I began producing at the local CBS affiliate in Greensboro, North Carolina. I did that for 3 years. I was the morning producer. And then I decided in the middle of a pandemic, I want to do something else. So I reached out and I made connections, and I found Spectrum News and this weird title that they created of planning editor. I had never heard of it before. None of my friends had ever heard of it before, but I'm really thankful that I was able to join this team. As a planning editor, I and the rest of the planning team work to manage 25-ish reporters and photographers for half of the state of North Carolina. There's another planning team in Charlotte that does the other half. And we help those reporters and photographers create amazing stories from North Carolina that are centric to our home. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Zyrus. And we're very thankful that you joined us as well. So moving on to Ollie. You want to go next?
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. As Katie mentioned, I'm Ollie Islin. I'm in my 4th year at Spectrum Networks. As you may be able to tell, I was born and raised in the UK, but I went to college in the US. I went to Yale and I graduated in 2018. I was a political science major. I was first introduced to Spectrum Networks when I interned at one of the regional sports networks in Los Angeles the summer before my senior year. I worked on their marketing team, helping plan events. Went to a bunch of Dodgers games, which was really fun. That's right on when they were on their uptick. But when I graduated from college, I was looking to move back to the East Coast, and so again, this is kind of indicative of the range of opportunities that are available at Spectrum Networks. But I got in touch with a couple of people I worked with, and there was an opening on the centralized research team based out of New York, and I have worked there ever since. My current role is media research and strategy manager, and I do all kinds of stuff ranging from day-to-day reporting, running research studies, helping with other qualitative research, supporting broader strategic initiatives, such as the market expansions that we've been embarking on in the past year. Again, all types of different stuff from the marketing side, from the analytics side, and the competitive intelligence side as well. We'll get into a lot of this stuff a little bit later on, but that is me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ollie. And yeah, I'll just, you've met me already, but I'll just say my name is Katie Lombardi, and I lead the digital team for Spectrum Networks. And I have the privilege of working with Ollie and Salika very closely. And I'm thrilled to be talking with Zyrus today about your role as a planning editor, which I think a lot of people on this call probably might not be as familiar with that role. I was hoping that you could talk a bit about what skills it takes for you to be a planning editor. What's an example of a recent story you worked on, and how did it come together?
Absolutely. So I didn't know what a planning editor was either when I got here. In a traditional news setting, a newsroom setting, you have a assignment desk team, and then you've got EPs and managers that work with reporters and photographers directly. A planning editor, the planning team, kind of merges those two together. So here at Spectrum, we are really focused on telling character-driven stories that get a little deeper. It's not just, oh, let's go talk to an official and slap some B-roll on top of it, and that's our story. We are really getting focused on the heart of who that character is and how that character's journey can tell you about the events happening in our life. So as a planning editor, I work hand in hand with my MMJs. Like I said, our planning team has about 25 to do your regular desk stuff. We answer phone calls and emails and all the stuff that makes a newsroom run. But from those, we can tell really in-depth stories, and we work hand in hand. We are working together to find that character, to justify what's happening in our community, to really make sure that we are telling a story that's really up to date in the news now. So an example of a recent story that I did was I was just going through emails, right? Like every day, everyone does it. And we got a pop-up that said, hey, a school in your district is renaming it. It was just a flyer. Like, hey, come out to our school's renaming. And I was like, why? Schools don't just rename their buildings. Like, what is happening? So I called up the PIO, the public information officer, said, hey, can you tell me why the school is renaming? And there was all this history about how it was the first Black African-American school way back when, and the history of changing the name and why it was so important. And there was this hidden story right there in our email that I was able to then pass on to a reporter. And then they were able to tell this really in-depth story that no one would have told because it was just sitting in there as a flyer. So that's us.
That's great. Yes. And of course, stories like the ones Zyrus works on don't appear only on TV. I think that's a really important distinction to make. They're also on our social media and our mobile app and our websites. So Salika, you oversee the digital operation in the Midwest. And what is our content strategy with our mobile app? Maybe you could talk a bit about that and how we think of content in the app.
Sure, absolutely. As Zyrus mentioned, we're really big on character storytelling. So we do have a good number of app stories that really focus on character storytelling. But one of the bread and butter of our apps is being able to cover that daily news, right? Something that's timely, objective. And a good example of what we did more recently and are doing actually this week, this past Tuesday, we had the not the primaries, but the elections in Ohio and some other states across the country did as well. In Ohio, we specifically ran a live blog. Why was that important? It was important to have those timely updates. We included tweets from all of our MMJs, from our digital reporters, and that's something we're really pushing out to the community to let them know, hey, we're here, we've got boots on the ground, we're listening to your stories, we're giving you these updates. One thing I think that we really pride ourselves on is being objective. We don't lean left or right. We try to just go shoot straight down the middle, give the facts, and take our opinion out of it. And I think that's really, really important when you're telling news, because now news has become a bit segmented and you've got these niche news organizations that are really telling stories that are leaning in the influence of whatever their superiors want. I think that's one thing I really think that Spectrum stands out, is they are a traditional news outlet in the sense that we just want to deliver the news. And I think we do a wonderful job of doing that. Now, in terms of the app with our daily news coverage, we are doing a lot of day turns. So as Katie mentioned, she leads our team. We also have, in that team, we have producers and we have digital journalists. So we actually have folks that are out there and gathering, and they may be talking to our version of Zyrus to talk about, hey, what stories do we have that they're covering? And so they'll go out and they often then translate that content back to linear. So there's really important collaboration between the two. It's not the traditional digital focus where you're taking content from TV and then regurgitating it on digital. It's very much an even platform, and it's really important that we collaborate and we share. So part of my role is to make sure that we facilitate that. So talking with the news directors in each of my markets is really vital, but also getting our MMJs on board and making sure that their digital piece is complementary to their television piece. So I think that's another really important thing that we highlight on our apps and our websites. I think one of the pieces of feedback I hear from our readers is, thanks for telling our stories. And that is really fulfilling, because I think for me as a journalist, the very basic thing that I really strive to do is be of service to our readers. And so that kind of really puts a nice little period at the end of the sentence that we tell, of the stories that we tell. So I think that kind of sums it up for us.
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Salika. So across all this content, Ollie, your team really helps measure our success. So how do we measure success for our digital TV and other platforms?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, Salika and Zyrus have talked a lot about storytelling and about the role of journalists and the planning editor and the managing director role. I think that the primary prerogative of my team, which is the audience insights team, is to basically take all of the analytics components, the research components, the insights components out of their hands so they can focus on telling these amazing character-driven stories that they have been talking about. And that applies across platforms. So digital, we have websites, we have a fantastic news app, and television as well. So just to dig into some of the types of research that we do and insights that we gather, there are three primary types. So there's the quantitative, which is the data, the numbers, the qualitative, which is kind of what do people think, what are people saying about our content and about our platforms, and then the competitive intelligence piece. So how do we stack up compared to different outlets, different news organizations? So I'll go through each of those quickly. On the quantitative side, data is obviously very important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. You can't look at data in a vacuum, but it does drive a lot of the decision-making that we do. I think something that we are very keen to stress is that we're data-informed, not data-driven, because obviously data can be subjective. There are many different ways you can slice it. I would know that is part of my job. But we have KPIs from platform to platform. We use a lot of different analytics tools. Adobe Analytics is our primary on digital, and then we use Nielsen ratings as well as set-top box data on TV. But as I mentioned, like a lot of what my team does is reconciling the data that we get from a lot of different feeds. So alongside that quantitative piece, you have the qualitative piece. We run focus groups. We do online community work. We have a brand tracker study that we do each quarter. We have all kinds of different avenues for people who consume our content to give us insights into what they like, what they don't like. And it's part of our job to really go through and drive, success based on what people are saying. And then there's this competitive intelligence piece as well. And one of the ways that we measure our success, independent of people saying that they like our content and independent of, the numbers increasing over time, is how we're stacking up against our competition. And again, there's a couple of different ways that we do that. On digital, there are softwares that allow you to track your performance against different types of outlets. And then on TV, we do a similar thing because we have, autonomy over a lot of our data. Independent of Nielsen, we can see how we're performing against different types of platforms and different news channels. So just to quickly recap, there's the quantitative piece where we're looking at various KPIs, how they change platform to platform over time. The qualitative piece, which is, how do people like our content? What can we change? How can we derive insights from direct feedback? And then the competitive intelligence piece, which is how do we stack up compared to our competition? And again, as I said, a lot of my team's work is a reconciliation job. How do you take the different data inputs and the different feedback loops and actually turn them into actionable insights that are going to help people like Salika, people like Cyrus tell these amazing character-driven stories?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear all three of you talk about storytelling. So Cyrus, Salika, you're talking about the storytelling we're doing for our customers, our viewers, our app users. Ollie, you're talking about the storytelling we're doing internally to really understand our audience, to understand the data. And really part of your role is to tell some stories to the other employees of Spectrum Networks so that, we all understand how are we performing across all of these platforms and what maybe can we be doing better to better serve our communities? So I think that's something that's really interesting to me as I hear the three of you talk. And I think something that could be interesting for some of our listeners today is to really maybe get into what a typical day might look like. We have an audience full of people who are maybe considering what they want their role to be, what they, might want their role to be, even a few years from now. So it could just be interesting to talk a bit about your day-to-day. So Ollie, if you don't mind, just maybe getting into what a typical day for you would look like in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is timely because obviously, as many of you know, there was an election that happened recently. Off year, but still important. And to give you a sense of the types of stuff that we do, we just launched a new voter guide, which is part of a broader initiative called the Politics Hub in our news app. And so this is the perfect example of kind of a day to day. Is okay. So the election happened yesterday. It's Wednesday morning. What did we do well? So we'll go and we'll look at our kind of suite of daily reports. We'll take a cross-platform snapshot. We'll look at when viewership peaked on television. We'll look at what kind of content people were interested in accessing in the app. How did that differ from the web? What kind of factors were driving engagement? Was it social media? Was it organic access? Was it push notifications? And what we'll do is we basically, again, as Katie mentioned, we're in the business of storytelling as well. It's a little bit different from the types of storytelling that Salika and Cyrus are involved with. But something that is very important for us is trying to derive, learnings and insights. So you have this event, an election, and the next day, while the next election might be, a year away, it's part of our job and our mission to basically try and assess what worked, what didn't, and keep an eye on that kind of 30,000-foot view of how can we not just drive engagement in the short term, how can we not drive people back to our platforms tomorrow or the next day, but how can we massage and nuance their experience based on the data and the feedback that we're getting to really influence how they're going to interact with our platforms in the future. So in terms of a typical day, that is probably an atypical day because not every day is following an election. But that's, one small example of the types of stuff that we would do surrounding these big events, surrounding, other types of stuff that's happening across our newsrooms.
That's great. Yeah. Salika, what about you? What's a typical day like for you?
I like to say there's no such thing as a typical day in news, which I feel is very true. But I will say we do start off with editorial meetings, and I'm sure Cyrus is familiar with that. So we start off with those in the Midwest. We have several because I've got several markets. So we'll tap into the linear editorial daily meetings that we have in the morning. But then we'll also sidebar and have our own digital daily editorial meetings. And the purpose of that is really to see what content can we mirror and complement with what TV has on. And so we'll talk about assignments. And the one thing that we try to keep in mind is that people need to be as fluid as possible so that if something happens, something changes, that we're able to pivot from our character storytelling and maybe hit that breaking news that just happened, right? So I think that's really important. Something else that we try to make sure we do, because in Ohio, we've got microclimates. Weather is a big deal for us. So we want to make sure that we stay on top of that as well. So some of the things that we do on a day-to-day is make sure that we hit the marks that we would normally look for in just our day turn coverage. And then we also try to take into account what's a linear day turn piece or pieces that need to happen, that we can make sure that we get that out to our app and our website. And so I work a lot with my version of Cyrus, which is Jill in Ohio, and she is phenomenal with getting us really helping with that connectivity between the two groups. We'll continue the day with another check-in, and then we'll wrap the day with a third check-in. So it's a lot of check-ins, but a lot of kind of moving parts are happening. We do a lot of sharing on the digital front. So that's one thing I also love, is that if we have a story in Ohio or Wisconsin or Kentucky that applies to Texas or California, we're talking to our counterparts. We're really active and really big on WebEx. So we share a lot of content in our groups there. And I love that part of it because we're talking to each other every day. And I think oftentimes in media organizations, people are talking at each other, right? We're actually talking with each other. We're communicating, we're collaborating. We're talking about, hey, I've got this great story, or hey, you guys could probably use this. And I really love the collaborative effort. So our day-to-day is really going to be dependent upon what content we have. Now, there are days that we plan out, like Ollie mentioned, election day. While it's an anomaly for him, it's nicer for us in the sense that we can plan it out. You don't often get to do that with news. So I think that's kind of the caveat there. So a typical day is not typical, I'll say.
That's so true. And I love what you were saying just about the collaborative environment. I see that every day, is different. But the one kind of constant is that we're always working together to achieve really common goals. And that's what it's all about. So I think that was great, Salika. Thank you. And Cyrus, how about you? What's a typical day like for you?
Yeah, it mirrors Salika's a little bit. Like, we start with an editorial meeting in the morning, but ours are kind of broken up into micro meetings that get bigger and bigger. So we start with just planners and the day turner MMJs for the day, the reporters that are going to turn something specifically for that day. And then we go into different zones. North Carolina is a big state. We've divided into 5 zones so we can really dig deeper into our communities. And so then we go into our zones, then we come back in for a statewide meeting. It's 9:15. We've already done 3 meetings. Your mind is going, wow, but it's okay because we're all working together. From that statewide meeting, we are leaving and making sure that we are knowing all the known knowns that we know. I know that was a lot, but that's kind of how it makes sense. As a planner, you're going to want to be really invested in the news so that when you hop on these calls in the morning, you know what's happening in your zone and the big things that are happening across the state. So you're going to want to be really invested into that news gathering. You're going to want to be really organized so that you have an understanding of actually this is in this zone and actually this is in this zone. But after all of those meetings, after we've talked about all the things for the day and who's doing what and who's going where, we really invest in deep diving into our MMJs and reporters and photographers. We call them, at least at our station, every single one of them every single day, just to check in, just to say, hey, I'm your planner. I'm here with if you need anything. Do you need help with finding a character? Do you need to get details or stats confirmed? Can we broaden your story? Instead of just having you do this great character-driven story, is there a way that we can expand it and get extra interviews or work with the digital to give them something special and different? And then can we have you come in and do it with an anchor so that it has more impact than just another story that's going on the air as a straight package format? So we really get invested with our MMJs and reporters throughout the day. And then we have a lot of more meetings because we're juggling all of these balls of all of these reporters and photographers across the state. We stay really organized on WebEx and we hop on a lot of meetings just to stay connected. So that conversation Salika and Katie were having about, yeah, we are in constant communication with each other is so true. You can't run a state like North Carolina with 5 different zones, 5 different sets of show rundowns and ideas for the day if you're not talking with each other. And we do that through WebEx and emails and phone calls and literally just walking across the newsroom and going, hey girl, hey guy, let's talk a little bit. We are also in charge of all of the political meetings and all of the pitches. The reporters have to come and pitch their story. So we really work really hard to craft those pitches and make sure that they are community-centered, character-centered. We're a visual medium. Do you have shots? Are you just going to go talk to an official and get a talking head, or do you have something interactive and that's going to look good on TV? We're having all of those meetings all throughout the day, on top of your traditional assignment desk duties. So you are answering phone calls from, hey, I've got the story idea, to, hey, I'm the PIO for this company or for this department, and we forgot this event going on, to a crazy man just finding our phone number and wanting to talk to us. You get all the things in the barrel. But that's kind of what our day looks like. It's a lot of meetings to plan the day, and especially if something's big is going to happen. So our planning team is the one who gets called upon when we have extra things. So we just had an election, and they called upon all the planners to ingest all of that information into the system to get those candidates up on the TV. It was a long day, but we got it, and it made for really good TV. It made for really strong characters, and that's kind of what our day looks like. Oh, and then we all get together at the end of the day and watch the newscast to see, what our hard work, how we got together. Oh, look, I made that phone call and that made it on TV. Oh, look, that's my MMJ with that story. So we really get together, have a post-show call to say what was good and what was bad, and then we go home and do it again the next day.
That sounds like a busy day, busy typical day, but I think that I can speak for all of us when I say it's more fun that way. So before we get to a Q&A, which I know we're going to do a few minutes of Q&A, I thought we could do a quick lightning round. So I'm going to go in the reverse order of what we just did. So Cyrus, do you want to start as the first to answer this question? What advice would you give to a student or a young professional looking to kickstart their career?
My advice would be to ask lots of questions, and to have no fear. I mean, this business that we're in is ever evolving, and the great thing about Spectrum that I've been able to see, I just got here a year ago, you guys. I am green behind the ears in the world of Spectrum, but they are willing to take chances. They are not afraid to have you bring your idea to the table and work it out. So if you have questions and you have an idea, bring them forward. Don't be afraid that, oh, because you're new, it's not going to be as valued, or, oh, because it's new, I'm new, my opinion doesn't matter as much. I also believe that when you're looking for a new job and you're hiring, don't let all of the check boxes on the this is what we're looking for stop you from applying for the job or asking questions about that job, because you never know. What you bring to the table might change what the job looks like entirely.
I love that advice. Great advice. Salika, you're next.
Same question, right?
Same question. Yes, advice.
Wonderful. I would say a couple of things. One is be present. And that really goes along with being a sponge. Be in the moment, understand what you're doing, understand what you don't know, understand what you do know. I think sometimes we just get so busy with everything going on that we forget to absorb. And I think that's really, really important. Another piece of advice would just be to listen. I know it sounds very simple, but sometimes we think we know everything and we don't. Sometimes everyone else knows more. And I learn a lot from my younger producers on our team from ideas they have. So I think no matter what role you're in, whether you're a producer or you're a reporter or you're a leader of a team or a manager, that listening both ways is so vital. It's so vital to growth for everybody. Another thing I would say is give yourself the confidence you need, because you may not always get that from others, and you shouldn't look for that. You should really seek within. If you know and you believe you can do it, then do it. And I'll just tell you a quick story. I'm the first woman in my family to graduate from college. I come from a family of immigrants. I had a non-traditional start. I was a mom, and so I got a lot of, you can't do this. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. I have to say, I look back at my younger self and I'm like, how did I do that? But it's that confidence in believing in yourself. And it sounds really cliche, but you are your best advocate. You are your best friend. And to what Cyrus was saying, if you want something and you work really hard and you put your energy and effort toward it, sky's the limit. And there are people that are watching and seeing your work, whether or not you think they are. We as leaders are looking at our younger folks and looking to see who we can groom up and who we can coach up. And that's one of my roles as a leader. And I'm always on the lookout for that. And I'm glad I had that lookout for me when I was coming up in the business. So those are kind of the key pieces of advice I would give.
That's awesome. Ollie, you.
How do I do that? A couple of things. I think just be curious, be interested, be tenacious, and be intentional about what it is you want to do. My role has changed an enormous amount since I began my job. It's gone in many, many different directions, and I've always been very clear about what it is that I enjoy doing. And you don't get what you want unless you ask for it in many, many situations. And so being intentional about the stuff that you enjoy and seeking out opportunities to do that, I think is great. You're not going to necessarily find your dream job or the job that you're going to do for the rest of your life right out of college. But put yourself in an environment that challenges you, that allows you to grow, and where those opportunities to grow exist. And I have very much found that has been the case with Spectrum Networks. And there's been a lot of change and a lot of kind of new approaches that we've seen over the past few years. And so it keeps you on your toes for sure, but keep following the opportunities that exist, and make sure they align with what it is that you want to do.
Such great advice. Thank you all. That was amazing. So with our last few minutes, Q&A, let's jump over to a Q&A. Do we have any questions?
So hello, everyone. My name is Milica, and I'm a media management student at Fordham University. Thank you for a very insightful session. And I think we have time for one question for everyone, which is, you talked about how every day is different in your job. How open is your job to innovation, and how important is it to you to be able to creatively contribute not only to the segments, but also the systems within your company?
Salika, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I was gonna volunteer, but I didn't want to be too overzealous. I would say that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, and beautiful name, by the way, love it. I would say a couple of things. Innovation is really what keeps us going, especially in digital. If you're not innovating, you're not growing, you're not learning. We work a lot with Katie, we work a lot with Ollie, we work a lot with news. Ollie's information helps us to grow, helps us to innovate. So we know what is working and what's not working. I think the other part of it is listening to what our readers and our subscribers want. So you have to pay attention to news. That going back to objectivity is really important in news gathering, right? Character stories help other people that are watching or reading identify with the person to understand why they care about that issue or why they should care about that issue. I think that's why it's really important that we innovate in different ways. And that's one of the ways we have done innovation. Another thing we're doing that we see is really successful, at least on the digital front, is doing those live blogs and updates. We don't have time to watch your appointment viewing TV, right? You're picking up your phone. That is your television. You want to know what's happening right now. So I think innovation doesn't look the same today as it does tomorrow or as it did yesterday. It's always happening. And I think you've got to keep your ears open, your eyes peeled for what that looks like. And sometimes it's coming from within. We do a lot of innovation on this team. We launched the app in July of 2020, and it has changed so much since then. And Katie can talk more about that, Ollie, and
Yes, that is a great segue. Let's jump to Ollie.
Key things.
Thanks, Salika.
Thanks, Katie. In terms of innovation, there's obviously lots of different types. Product is one of the main areas that we can look to innovate. We have a fantastic product team that's one of the big benefits of working for a company like China that has a lot of that stuff in-house. I think that from the product side in particular, in terms of how it supports our editorial efforts, one thing that my team is very involved with is this competitive intelligence piece and what are other companies doing we can essentially emulate. What are they doing that can inspire our thinking? And that's one of the fantastic aspects that my team has been involved with is a kind of willingness to listen. One of the major initiatives that we're going to involve down next year is personalization. How can we make our platforms more elastic to the needs and the behaviors of our consumers? And so it's not a case of Katie just deciding we're going to do it this way. It's an incredibly collaborative process where we bring all kinds of different ideas and different perspectives to the table. And so while that might not be so innovative in and of itself, the way that we approach things has innovation baked in, because we're willing to kind of take steps that other organizations might not be willing to do, especially in the local space, which there's been a lot made of challenging economics, etc. We've been very lucky that we have had that bandwidth and that runway to innovate, but that's on the product.
Yes, I think really what Ollie's biggest, I think the big point there is always just about understanding your audience, understanding, your customer, who you're creating this content for. And Cyrus, I'm curious, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation is really big for us on the planning team. Like I said, the role was new to me, but it was also really new to Spectrum. So it is ever evolving and ever changing. And thankfully, they understand that as those things, as the position and the people evolve, that there are going to be highs and lows, and we deal with them as they come. When I started, we were really focused on a character-driven story. So as long as they had the best, sob story to get tears out of somebody, then it was worthwhile putting on TV. But then we realized, oh no, we're losing our news relevancy. Like, it's great that you have a great story, but why does anybody outside of those people care? So it was really fine-tuning what was working for us. I talked about how we have a full day of meetings. When I started, there were twice that many meetings, and we have really narrowed that down. And we are working really closely with programs to help us get through the day. We've got Delete, we've got Smartsheet, we've got WebEx. We're using all of these really innovative, because our team is spread out across the state. Some of us are in a newsroom, some of us are working from home, some of us are in the field. We're really taking all of those innovative aspects to get things on air on TV.
Thank you all so much for your responses and this session. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys.